Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. In today's video I have quite an exciting iron farm to show you. At least I am excited to show it to you. This iron farm has 348 villages and produces around 14,000 iron per hour. This however is not that special. What is actually special about this farm is that it is double stacking. It isn't also just slow double stacking, no, this is actually fast double stacking. It stacks one of the villages in 39 seconds. Compared to most already existing double stacking, most double stacking takes about 52 seconds per village. So this total reset time of this farm is also quite fast. It is just about 4 hours. So the type of double stacking that I used here is, I think, new. At least I came up with it myself and I haven't seen it anywhere. And in this video I want to explain how this double stacking works, and yeah, just explain all the tips and tricks that I used in order to get this farm to work. Alright, so let's first take a look at how this double stacking works. Alright, so the farm is about to stack its first villages, and I will just walk you through basically how the reset algorithm works. So as with all iron farms, in the first step we create a new village, right here. Okay, so and then in the second step we move the village closer underneath the door wing. And this is also what happens with most iron farms. So right here you can see that the village is moved all the way underneath the door wing. So right now I will tell a few things about this marker mod. So the marker mod displays the center of a village. This is where the village is located, obviously. And from the center it displays lines going to all the doors that are connected to this village. And then on the outside we have one big circle, and in this case I chose to not work with the radius. So the radius is actually a bit smaller than this circle. But this circle here is called, I think, the door sphere. And basically any door within this circle can enter to this village. Any door that is detected outside this circle will either enter to another village or create a new village. Anyway, when the farm is shifted underneath the door wing, we first are going to add it to the door wing, as you can see right here. So what this does is right now 11 doors in this door wing are connected to the farm, and these doors will never disconnect. So after the reset is done, the village will basically rest on these doors somewhere in the middle of the farm here. Anyway, after this happens, so normal iron farms right now would continue with dragging the village to the other side and connecting it to the last door wing, and just repeat those steps to just get all the villages in place. So in order to make a double stacking, we first have to create a new village right now. Because if we wait any longer and connect the village also to that side, then this blue circle will just be way too big, and we will not be able to basically get a new village here. So first we get this new village right here, then we can connect the blue village to these doors. So because we basically added a bunch of doors here, right now the farm is shifted underneath this door wing, and we can connect the second set of doors here. After this set of doors is connected, we can shift this farm, or shift the pink village closer, and also connect it to the door wing. So far this isn't that difficult. However, the real challenge comes when you want to get the pink village to this side. So the problem is that you have to use a similar setup as over there. But if you right now will just detect these doors, then they are within the blue circle, and therefore they can also enter up to the blue village. And if you take a look, the center of the blue village definitely is a lot closer, so these doors will just enter to the blue village. And right now there is no possible way to get the pink village over to this door wing. So what normal double stacking iron farms will do is they will just shuffle around the centers as much as possible and try to find a way to actually connect to the pink village. However, in this case I have a pretty smart solution, because all you have to do is just wait a little. So by waiting you can see that first these doors here disconnect, then after a little bit also the doors down here will disconnect. Just a little longer. Okay, right this. So now also the doors disconnect. And now you can see that we are about to connect this village to the doors here. So if you remember previously this wasn't possible because basically the blue village was just too close. But by waiting a little bit, all the doors here disconnected and the blue center shifted all the way in that direction. And now the pink village is actually closer to these doors than the blue village is. And therefore, if we now detect these doors, they will end up to the pink village. So you can also see if we do that, then we will create a gigantic pink village, and we can't create a new village over here. So before we at these doors to the pink village, we first have to create our new village. So in the step after this, we will add these doors to the pink village, and then we will shift the center underneath this door ring. So right now we can basically add this door ring to the pink village, or add this pink village to the door ring, I should say. And then we can start all over again, but now with the yellow village. So first we move the yellow village closer and connect it to the door ring. Then before we shift the yellow village over to this side, we first have to create a new village. And right now you can see that also these doors here are disconnected from the pink village. And right now the pink village is shifted all the way in this direction. And therefore previously the pink village would be too close to these doors and we could not connect to the yellow village, but right now the pink village shifted all the way in that direction, and therefore the yellow village now is closer. So we can connect these doors to the yellow village and then connect the yellow village to this door ring. This is basically what keeps repeating and repeating. So we can just watch a few more cycles go quite slowly. And you can kind of see how the villages are being kind of woven. So you see, first we go like this and connect to that side, and then basically when the green village is all the way over there, just a moment. So when the green village is there, then we can connect to this side. And basically with the other villages it's also the case. So when the red village is all the way in that side, then we can connect to the other side. So basically, to summarize this all, this farm is not based on shuffling the centers around too much. So basically we use the same number of satellites as with normal stacking iron farms. However, this farm is entirely based on timing. So we use the fact that at some point this village is all the way close to that satellite, and only then we can basically connect the blue village. And this turns out to be incredibly efficient. This is definitely one of the simplest double stacking iron farms, but it is also one of the fastest. So now I want to explain a bit more in how I actually designed this farm. So as per usual, when I start designing a farm, I first set up a bit of the door wings and just played around with a bit of the satellite layouts. And I already soon noticed that I had to push these satellite layouts a bit out in this direction instead of having them in the middle right here. And I had to push out these satellite these satellites a bit in this direction. So the reason for this is quite simple. When the farm is in this position and I need to create a new village here, it simply wouldn't work if this door was right here in the middle, because then it would be inside basically this blue circle and it would not be able to create a new village like this. So therefore I need to push this satellite a bit in this direction and this satellite a bit in this direction. And I also had to push these satellites out a bit as well to counteract the changes that I had to make to the first satellites. After I'd made like a global setup for the satellites, I started to actually work on the timings here. So it was pretty easy to figure out the order in which I had to activate all the satellites, which I also showed you or explained you when I was talking about how the farm actually works. Figuring out the timings in which I had to activate the satellites was quite difficult. So see, the reason for this is that a villager can take up to 6 seconds to register a door, and it will always deregister the door after 1 minute. And just with these timings you actually have to play around and make the entire order work. So I ended up figuring it out by making a little layout like this, where I have some numbers and signs which basically tell me when certain satellites are activated and deactivated. And I managed to figure out the way in which this was possible. I do not want to go into too much detail about exactly how I figured out this layout, because it is pretty boring and it also takes pretty long to explain. But this little layout here will be in the real download, and you will have, or you can have a look at it yourself and compare it to the farm. So then I actually managed to also do the redstone decently quickly, and it didn't take me like that long of a time to actually get a working farm in one quadrant. However, making this farm work in all quadrants really was a pain in the back. So I had a lot of issues, mainly because centers shift in different quadrants, and also I had some double door registering issues. So let me first explain the center shiftment, because this is quite the easiest to understand. So for this I have to go to the area around 0, 0, and then I can quite easily explain it. So first I want to explain why the centers shift in different quadrants. So right here I am in 0, 0, so this little setup here is in 4 different quadrants. So when I detect one of these setups, you can see in this case the center is right here. So, and I can do here the same for example, the quadrant here next to it. And in this case, the center is also right here. However, when I take a look at it in this quadrant, you can see that the center of the exact same structure is in a different place. And in the last quadrant here, it will also be in the same location as in that quadrant. So yeah, it is also right here. So you can clearly see that it is in different positions in different quadrants. Okay, so let's maybe first talk a bit about why this basically this misalignment or shifting happens. So let's just suppose that we have 2 different setups like this, and one of them is in the positive quadrant and one is on the negative quadrant. So let's say this is on positive 1, 2, 3, and this is on positive 4. Then the average position obviously is on position 2.5. So that would be directly in the middle of these blocks. However, Minecraft doesn't like its centers to be on like non-integer positions, so it will actually round this off. And the rule that it uses for rounding the center off is it rounds this off to the nearest lowest integer. So in this case, that means the average position is 2.5, so the nearest lowest integer is 2 actually. So right here. So in this case, the center will be 2. But for example, if we take a look to the other quadrant, basically the negative quadrant, and we do the same again, then obviously the average position will be minus 2.5, but in this case, basically the nearest lowest integer will be negative 3. And you can see right there it will be 2, and here it is negative 3. So you can see it shifted by like 1 block. And this will be the case for both the x and the z axis. Actually not for the y axis, because there is no such thing as a negative y quadrant. And you can also see that shifting happening right here. However, there is one interesting thing. If you so you can see the centers basically shift in the z direction. However, they do not shift in the x direction. And this is quite easy to explain, because I set up these doors in such a way that the average position of these 3 doors is already on an integer. It is exactly on this block here. And this means that if you round this number off in the different quadrants, basically 3, the nearest lowest integer, will be 3, and negative 3, the nearest lowest integer, will also be negative 3, and therefore it will not experience any difference in the quadrants. So here you can see why the rounding happens, and you can also see how to basically surpass this rounding by having the center on an exact integer position. Now let's go back to the iron farm again and see how I implemented it there. So when it comes to the iron farm, I use the fact that I have the villages on an integer position in one specific case, and that is the villages that are already stacked. And this requires a bit of a special dooring. So you might know that the detection range of a villager is 32 blocks wide. And this, for example, means that, well, let's scale down, let's just use 4 blocks. And this, for example, means that if you want to connect the village right here, you need to connect it on this side. But because you have an even number of blocks here, the average position will be in the middle of these 2 blocks and therefore not be on an integer position. I also didn't therefore use the full detection range of a villager, but only used 31 blocks. So you can see I have a set of 15 wide doors right here and also 15 wide strip of doors here. And therefore if I connect, for example, this set of doors here with this set, then the average position in the z direction will be right here in the middle, and therefore be on an integer and not experience any rounding in other quadrants. And also, if you take a look at the doorway in this direction, you can basically see 5 doors right here, 4 doors like this and 2 at the top. And if you look at it from this direction, you will see exactly the same. So 5 doors right here, 4 doors on top and 2 right here. And therefore basically the center will land exactly on this block because both sides sort of cancel each other out, you can say. So this is like the main way how I implemented the integer technique into this farm. So this means that the villages here in the center will not shift in the different quadrants. And this made designing the farm and making it work in all the quadrants about 10 times easier. So I also tried to implement this technique in different ways. So for example, the average position of the first satellite here, so the 3 doors here together, lays on an integer. And also when you connect the village that is created on these doors with these doors here, the center will also lay on an integer, so it will lay exactly on top of this block here, and also this doesn't shift in the different quadrants. However, I quickly found out that this actually doesn't matter too much, and the reason for this is, well, you can have this center here on an integer, and this will mean that if you connect, or if you basically go from the second satellite, so from this step, to any of the doors in the iron farm, if it then works in this quadrant, it will work in other quadrants. However, the problem is, as soon as you connect the first door inside this farm here, so only this door, then when this door is connected, it will basically recalculate a new center, so just after 1 door is added, and then you won't be on an integer position anymore. And this means that the second door does not necessarily have to work in all the quadrants. So what you basically do by having the satellites on integer positions is you make the step from one satellite to another satellite always work in all quadrants. But basically the satellite itself does not have to work, because basically subtick, so while the villager is registering all the doors, with like half of the satellite added, obviously that satellite plus half of this satellite does not have to be on an integer, and it is also very likely not to be on an integer, and therefore it might fail. This is pretty rare to happen, especially if you start stacking on the west direction and move towards the east direction. This is because like the order in which the villager registers the doors does work in your favor, but because I am double stacking here and I also need to move from the north direction to the south direction, then the order in which the basically the villagers detect the doors does not really work in your favor, and therefore I first had basically this satellite here also on an integer, so the same as over there, but it didn't actually work in all quadrants. So what did work is connect from this satellite to the first door. I mean, that is kind of obvious because the position after the satellite is added will always be exactly on top of these blocks here. However, for example, when the first door in the door wing was added to the second door in the door wing, did not work in all quadrants. So basically you have those subtick problems again. And it's in the end I managed to get it work in all quadrants by not going for an integer satellite setup. So right now the satellite here is not always exactly on top of this block right here. but it does work in all quadrants, this. And this is just, mainly a message for the iron farmers. If you design such a farm and you think it works in all quadrants because you have all the satellites on integer positions, well, then this is absolutely not the case, and it might sometimes even be easier to get something to work in all quadrants by not going for integer positions. So anyway, that was like the experience that I had with setting stuff on integer positions. So I did use it in a few cases. So in this satellite, in the satellites on the outside, and the villagers, for the villages that have already been stacked on the door wings. In those cases it was pretty useful. But for example in the satellite underneath here, it just didn't work for me. So I hope that iron farmers can take something away from this and maybe use this knowledge in some of your own builds. Anyway, so this was the first problem that I encountered, and it probably took me like about half of the design process of this farm to actually get this to work in all quadrants. Now I want to take a look at the second and also pretty big issue that I encountered when designing this farm. So the last thing I want to talk about is a bug called double door registration. So double door registration is basically a bug where a door basically is not connected to one village, but a door is connected to two villages. And this happens because the bottom door or the bottom part of the door connects to one village and the top part of the door will connect to another village. And there is not a whole lot known about this. What we do know is that it kind of happens when the bottom part of a door is closer to one village and the top part is closer to another village, I think. But don't quote me on this. You do normally not encounter this bug with just single stacking iron farms, because you basically never have a situation where this bug can occur. But with double stacking iron farms that is the case. And let me just quickly show this bug in action. So all I have to do for this farm to encounter this bug is take out these two doors on the satellite. And the same goes for this side. And if I now reset the farm will definitely encounter double door registration. So let's see. Reset the farm, and then I'll just speed the game up a little bit so we can see it. So you can see the first few villages stacked normal, and here you can see it already crashes. Like the villages are not being stacked in the middle and they just go to all sides. I can just tick warp the game for a little bit and you can see that right now absolutely no more villages are stacked. And this is because one of the doors here in this door wing, did experience double door registration. So that is this door right here. So you can see basically two lines going to this door. One of the lines here at the top and the line here at the bottom. And yeah, this simply occurred because I took out two doors here on this end. And therefore the center was basically in a bit of a different position and the radius was in a bit of a different position. And then there was the possibility for double door registration to occur. So the way that I fixed it in this farm is simply by just endlessly tweaking the satellite over here until I got basically a setup that worked in all quadrants. So don't ask me exactly how I did this, because it was like an absolutely brutal and painful process, but I managed to find a satellite setup that didn't have any double door registration in any of the quadrants. And also another fix that I had, so I basically had the problem that either whatever I did, either this row of doors here experienced some double door registration, or this row here at the end. And whatever I seemed to do, it was always either of these two, so in the end I just decided to take out these two villages here. Because if I didn't do that, then one of these two villages would experience double door registration and the farm will also break towards the end of the building process. So yeah, this is basically all I can tell about double door registration. As I said again, there is simply not a whole lot known about it. But yeah, this is like my approach to how I solved it. So endlessly tweaking the satellites and just taking out some of the villages that would experience double door registration. Anyway, now to show you that it really works if I place those satellite or these two doors back again. I will just quickly do that as well. And by the way, this might also be useful to basically know if you want to build this farm yourself. So you can just quite simply reset this farm while it is resetting by just taking out all the items from this dropper here and place them in this hopper, then wait for like 1 or 2 minutes until basically this hopper clock is in this state, and then you can just press the button again and the farm will reset. Okay, so now the farm will be resetting again, and as you can see it just stacks fine now without any double door registration issues. So as a last note, the world download for this farm will obviously be in the description, so you can check it out for yourself and maybe also build it for yourself. However, this farm is extremely fragile. I made sure that I tested it a lot and also tested it in all quadrants, and I am absolutely sure that if you build this exact farm, that it will work. However, you can just miss one little thing, just miss one door or have one door in a different place and the farm can already break. So if you build this on your own, then well, and it doesn't work, then it is like your own risk, and you can just debug it by making sure that you build it exactly as the farm in the world download. However, I don't think this is like necessarily a good farm to build in your own survival world, simply because the complexity of a double stacking farm does not pay off against basically the advantage of it stacking faster. At least that is my opinion about it. But you of course can decide this for yourself. Anyway, that was all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hoped you were able to kind of follow my explanation. I do understand that it was quite difficult at some parts, and I also talked about quite advanced village mechanics, but I hope that some of you definitely still learned something from it. Anyway, that was all for this video, and see you next time.